All right, so this week we get to begin our study of World War One. So directly after the era of imperialism, we move right into World War One. And we're going to see today that imperialism is actually one of those causes. But from 1914 to 1918, the world was just stuck in one of the most brutal, terrible wars that we have ever experienced as humans. Now, as a brief overview, by the end of the war, by the end of those 4 years, 17 million people will be killed. It's going to be 4 years of fighting, and almost all of it takes place in Europe. So while we call this a world war, almost all of the fighting takes place in one general area. The reason it's called a world war is that the rest of the world comes to that area to fight. So because the Europeans are the ones mostly fighting, the Europeans had gone out and built empires. So other parts of their empires are going to come and fight for them in Europe. And it's going to be brutal, terrible, and quite frankly, memorable. The people that lived through this remembered it greatly as they're moving into World War II, and people are just terrified of getting stuck in another war like this one. So the main causes of World War One is what we're focusing on today. We want to focus on the causes of World War One. What makes World War One happen? So it's going to be real easy to remember. You just got to remember main causes. MAIN. M, militarism, A, alliances, I, imperialism, and N, nationalism. These four things together come together to essentially create an environment in which World War One was ready to get started. All these countries needed was an excuse to fight, and we'll see that today as well. So that first cause is militarism. How is militarism going to lead to this conflict? Well, militarism, first of all, is essentially it's actively preparing for war in times of peace, or it's elevating military strength of your nation, elevating military culture, elevating this idea of being strong and powerful above all else. So the nations of Europe are going to be actively preparing for war. They're going to actively be trying to be stronger than everybody else, and they're going to continually uh, elevate and raise up this military culture idea. And so when they get an excuse to fight, I mean, the people are ready to go. They want to prove that they're stronger. They want to prove that they've prepared better than everybody else. Each nation just kind of wants to prove they're the greatest on earth. And we saw that during the age of imperialism. They're going out trying to build an empire to be the best, the greatest, and the strongest. In Germany, for example, William Kaiser II is going to expand Germany and their naval power. They're going to build a strong navy and ships. Well, this is going to worry Britain greatly because Britain is on an island, and Britain had historically had the greatest navy. So when Germany builds 10 ships, Britain goes and builds 15 more. Well, then when France sees what Germany and Britain have done, they go out and build ships. And then Germany realizes they're falling behind, and so they build more ships. What we end up with is what's called an arms race. Um, Arms race is when multiple countries are building and creating weapons to try to get an advantage over everybody else. Uh, the countries of France, Italy, Japan, US are going to eventually join this race. And what it means is by the time war comes, these countries have been building up their arsenals of navy ships, of planes, of cannons, artillery. And when they eventually do fight, they have the ability to completely annihilate each other. And so the destruction is going to be just horrendous when we get to that point. Now, the second cause is alliances. Alliances. Um, Typically in Europe, there had been a lot of neutrality. The idea that when one nation goes to war with another, everyone else just kind of sits out and lets those two fight it out. Uh, but during the age of imperialism and leading up to World War One, there were many alliances made uh, to essentially the idea was to protect each other, right? So Britain, Russia, and France are going to agree that, oh, if one of us goes to war, we'll protect each other. And then there were five or six others. Germany, Austria, Ottoman Empire are going to agree to this. But these were all secret alliances, so no one knew what was going on. So when a small conflict eventually breaks out, what we're going to see is that Austria and Serbia go to war. Well, then Germany joins in to support Austria, Russia joins to support Serbia, and then Britain joins to support Russia, and France joins to support Russia, and the Ottoman Empire joins to support Germany. And this quickly balloons and gets out of hand very, very quickly. But this chart you see on the screen now, this is going to be the two major sides. The Triple Entente is going to be the Allied side. They're going to be the winning side by the end. It is the side that the United States eventually joins. We joined the war late, but we will join that side. The Central Powers are Germany, Austria, and the Ottoman Empire. Now, again, you're looking at 6 countries and thinking, well, Coach Beer, why are we calling this a world war? We're not giving the exhaustive list of every country involved. These are just the major players. These are the countries sending millions of troops into battle. These are the ones paying the largest price and kind of deciding how things are going. All right, so the third cause is imperialism. We're not going to talk about this a lot because we studied imperialism for 3 weeks. But imperialism, as a reminder, it's controlling other areas or countries for the benefit of the mother country. Natural resources are sent from those areas back to the main country to create products. But how does all of this lead to World War I? As these countries are going into Africa and imperializing, going into China, going into India, Japan, countries are competing for land, they're competing for resources, and it is going to lead to conflict. Those conflicts, those rivalries, those desires to go out and beat each other to the stronger, more important areas. It leads to these conflicts. It leads to this mindset of the countries of Europe being enemies with one another, of being rivals, to the point where, again, they're just looking for an excuse to be able to fight each other. Now, the fourth cause is nationalism. And we've mentioned nationalism a few times in this course, but nationalism is a devotion to one's country. Nationalism is being so devoted to your country that you would do anything for it. Competition, rivalry is going to manifest. Each country is going to feel they're superior to other countries, right? It's that idea that America is the best. We are better than everybody else. Or British people saying Britain is the best. We're better than everybody else. It's the idea that your country is good. Your country is perfect. Your country has a right and it should go out and take over other areas. Your country should be as powerful and as strong and as influential as possible. Well, unfortunately, every country can't do this. So that leads to, once again, rivalry and conflict. Again, this puts the world in a position so that when the fighting started, the people were actually glad because then Britain could go out and show that they're the best. France could go out and show they're the best. Germany could go out and show they're the best. People had a chance to go out and fight and serve their country, and they consider that a good thing. On top of this, many ethnic groups are going to want independence, and this is going to lead up to the cause of World War I. Places like Serbia had been taken over by imperialism. Well, they didn't want to be taken over, and so they're going to rebel, just like the Africans rebelled, the people in India rebelled, the Chinese rebelled. So that rebellion is going to kind of start World War I that we'll see here in just a second. All right, so here's a quote from Sidney Harris, and he writes that the difference between patriotism and nationalism is that the patriot is proud of his country for what it does, and the nationalist is proud of his country no matter what it does. The first attitude creates a feeling of responsibility, but the second, a feeling of blind arrogance that leads to war. Now, this is a more modern view of nationalism as well. In the modern world, we see the dangers of blind nationalism through what it does in World War I, and then through what it does in World War II in the Japanese empires and the Nazi empire. So many people look at patriotism as a good thing. Being proud of what your country does well and being proud of the freedoms or the good things your country provides is a good thing. However, blindly being loyal to your country regardless of what it does, for example, going out and killing Jews, going out and massacring Chinese people, those are bad things. We don't want to turn a blind eye to that and still be loyal to our country. So this is pointing out here that there's a difference between patriotism and nationalism. Patriotism is feeling proud and feeling responsible for a lot of things in your country. Nationalism is blindly following whatever your leaders tell you. One can be a good thing, one is leads to war. Now, when war finally breaks out, this is going to be what the map looks like. Everything in black mostly stays neutral and stays out of it, with the exception of Africa. Some of those areas are taken over by these allied and central powers, and so they send soldiers to fight because that's a part of their empire. But you have the orange going against the green. The green side is going to eventually be the winning side. And if you have any type of military knowledge whatsoever, you can see that the central powers are in trouble. They are surrounded, right? Dead center there, they are surrounded. The Ottoman Empire in the bottom right of your screen in the Middle East They're in a little bit better position. But if you're Germany smack dab in the center or you're Austria smack dab in the center, you are surrounded by your enemies. And that's going to present a big challenge. So now you might be thinking, Coach Beard, you've told us a lot of stuff, but we don't know how World War I begins. So let's talk about the actual thing that gets bullets flying back and forth. So those main causes essentially put Europe in a place where they were ready to go to war. They're just looking for an excuse. So now let's look at the excuse. In 1914, the Archduke of Austria, Franz Ferdinand, is assassinated by a Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. All right, so here's the situation. Austria had built an empire, and Serbia was one of their areas. The Serbians did not want to be taken over, and we have seen how people rebel over and over during the era of imperialism. Well, there's going to be essentially a terrorist group that call themselves the Black Hand, and they're going to be plotting essentially how can we get Serbia independence. Well, what they decide to do is to assassinate the Archduke Franz Ferdinand when he travels to Serbia. We're going to look at a video about this tomorrow. It's really, or not tomorrow, but the next time we meet. It's a really good video. So I'm not going to go into detail. So what happens when he assassinates the Archduke Franz Ferdinand? Austria is going to declare war on Serbia in response, and this is going to start a chain reaction that gets out of hand very, very quickly. The alliance system is going to force other nations to take sides until we eventually have the mess that is World War One. Now, the video tomorrow is going to tell you the story, but I can't hold back. Uh, so Gavrilo Princip is supposed to kill the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and there's a group of them that's supposed to do it. So what's happening is Franz Ferdinand is essentially in a parade. He is coming through and waving to the people. Well, there are several people that are supposed to kill him. The first guy throws a grenade at him and bounces off and doesn't kill him, and he's arrested. Everybody else essentially gets afraid and runs away when that fails. Gavrilo Princip is also somewhere else, kind of pouting that he has failed. And the next thing he knows, he sees the Archduke Franz Ferdinand coming down the street. The driver, when the grenade was thrown at him, when the explosion happens, they try and get the heck out of there. Well, eventually they take a wrong turn. And when they take a wrong turn, they have to stop in the street and turn around. When they stop to turn around, the assassin Princip is sitting right there. He pulls out his gun and he shoots the Archduke and his wife. He's then arrested and eventually killed. But that's how this whole thing happens. It's really a crazy story that you'll get to learn more about when you look at the video tomorrow or the next time we meet. Now, here's Serbia. All right. So, really, this is a teeny little country. And if there were not the alliance systems, if the main causes were not there, this still would have started a war. But it would have started a war between Austria and Serbia. But because the main causes are there, we now have the entire world coming to fight. All right. So this is the spark that starts the fire. But there was already it was already there. Everybody's just looking for an excuse to fight, and they use this as their excuse. So there's the assassin. We'll look at that again the next time. Here's a painting of him assassinating the Archduke and his wife as they're driving down the street. Now, here's how quickly this gets out of hand. On August 1st of 1914, Germany declares war on Russia because Russia came to defend Serbia from Austria. So when Austria and Serbia go to war, Russia joins Serbia because of their alliance, and then Germany joins Austria because of their alliance. Well, then 2 days later, Germany knows that France is going to come to Russia's aid, so Germany declares war on France. Then Germany invades Belgium to get to France on the same day, and Britain comes to the aid of Belgium and France. At that point, it's out of control. World War I has begun. People are parading in the streets. They are excited. This is a great chance for their country to go out and prove what's going on. 3 months later, everybody's depressed and realizes this is so much worse than anyone expected. Most countries thought it would be over by Christmas. They'd be home. Instead, they were digging trenches. They were getting ready for 4 years of desperate fighting.